There's a pattern hidden in the daily routines of world-class performers that most people never notice. It's not what they do during the day, it's what happens in the first 15 minutes after they wake up. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. What do Roman legionnaires and Navy SEALs have in common that nobody talks about? The Roman Legion wasn't just the most powerful military force in ancient history. It was a psychological machine built on one radical principle. Morning discipline determines battlefield dominance. Every legionnaire followed an identical wake-up protocol. And it wasn't about physical training. It was about mental fortification. Here's what historians rarely mention. Roman commanders understood that the first hour of consciousness shapes the entire cognitive architecture of the day. They called it hora prima, the first hour. During this window, soldiers were forbidden from casual conversation, complaints, or distraction. Instead, they performed a specific sequence: silence, visualization of victory, and deliberate physical action. Modern neuroscience now explains why this worked. The brain's prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and discipline, operates in a unique state immediately after waking. It's called the hypofrontality window. During this period, neural pathways are most receptive to intentional programming. The Romans didn't have MRI machines, but they had centuries of combat data. They knew that warriors who controlled their first thoughts won more battles. But here's where it gets darker. Most people destroy this window within seconds of waking up. The average person checks their phone 80 times a day, and 61% do it within 5 minutes of opening their eyes. That's not harmless. That's cognitive sabotage. You're flooding your prefrontal cortex with dopamine spikes, cortisol surges, and decision fatigue before you even leave bed. You're programming yourself for distraction and reactivity. Navy SEALs discovered the same pattern independently. Their Hell Week training includes a protocol called immediate action drills. The moment they wake up, they execute a pre-planned physical sequence without thinking. No hesitation, no negotiation. This trains the brain to bypass the procrastination response entirely. It's not about motivation. It's about eliminating the gap between thought and action. Tim Ferriss interviewed dozens of high performers and found this exact pattern repeated. They all own their first moments. Whether it's journaling, cold exposure, or strategic thinking, they refuse to let external chaos dictate their mental state, and that's just the surface level. The real secret runs much deeper. Why did Stoic philosophers practice discomfort before breakfast? Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, had a morning practice that seemed borderline masochistic. Before attending to empire business, he would intentionally expose himself to discomfort: cold water, physical strain, or deliberate hunger. This wasn't asceticism, it was strategic neural conditioning. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology only recently confirmed. Voluntary hardship in the morning builds what researchers call stress inoculation. When you choose discomfort before the day forces it upon you, you're training your nervous system to remain calm under pressure. You're literally rewiring your amygdala's threat response. Here's the mechanism. Your brain has a prediction system. It constantly forecasts threats and prepares defensive responses. When you repeatedly expose yourself to controlled morning stress, cold showers, intense exercise, challenging mental tasks, you teach your brain that discomfort doesn't equal danger. This creates what neuroscientists call predictive adaptation. Your stress threshold rises permanently. Only here's what almost nobody realizes. This has nothing to do with toughness or willpower. It's about chemical recalibration. Morning discomfort triggers a cascade of norepinephrine and cortisol that, when controlled, improves focus and alertness for 6–8 hours afterward. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils. Science calls it hormetic stress response. Compare this to the modern morning ritual: hit snooze, scroll social media, drink coffee to fight fatigue, rush to work feeling behind. You're not training resilience. You're reinforcing fragility. Your brain learns that mornings mean avoidance and comfort seeking. That pattern follows you all day. Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL commander, wakes at 4:30 a.m. and immediately does something physically demanding. Not because he loves it, Because he's hacking his neurochemistry, he's creating a baseline of controlled intensity that makes everything else feel manageable. This isn't motivation porn. It's applied neuroscience. And here's where everything shifts. You don't need hours of suffering. You need 10 minutes of intentional discomfort. That's the minimum effective dose to reprogram your stress response and unlock sustained high performance. But there's something even more disturbing that ancient warriors discovered. How did Miyamoto Musashi use a 5-minute morning ritual to become undefeated in 61 duels? Miyamoto Musashi is considered the greatest swordsman in Japanese history. 61 duels, 61 victories. Many of his opponents were skilled warriors. Yet Musashi never lost. His secret wasn't superior technique. It was a morning ritual so simple that most people dismiss it as irrelevant. Every morning, before dawn, Musashi practiced mokuso, seated stillness, with absolute mental clarity. But this wasn't meditation for relaxation. It was combat preparation. He would visualize every possible way his opponent could attack, then mentally rehearse his counter responses. He was running neural simulations before neuroscience even existed. Here's the breakthrough insight. Visualization isn't fantasy. It's motor cortex activation. When you vividly imagine performing an action, your brain fires the same neural patterns as if you were physically doing it. This creates what researchers call functional equivalence. Mental practice produces real skill improvement. Musashi was literally training his reflexes without moving. But here's the detail that changes everything. He didn't visualize victory. He visualized failure scenarios and his adaptive responses. This is called negative visualization in cognitive psychology, and it's the opposite of what most motivational speakers teach. By mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios, you eliminate surprise. You remove fear's paralyzing effect. When the actual duel happened, Musashi's brain had already experienced it dozens of times. LeBron James does something remarkably similar. Before every game, he spends exactly 15 minutes in silent visualization, mentally walking through defensive schemes and his counter moves. This isn't superstition. It's pre-loading his procedural memory so game-time decisions happen automatically, without conscious thought. And right here is the brutal truth most people avoid. High performance isn't about positive thinking. It's about eliminating uncertainty through mental rehearsal. The morning is when your working memory is clearest, making it the optimal time for this practice. If this is clicking for you, drop the word clarity in the comments. What's the biggest obstacle you face in the morning? Hit that like button and subscribe. We're excavating the hidden patterns of peak performance every week. But the most radical discovery comes from a psychological experiment that nobody expected. What happens when you make one micro-decision in the first 60 seconds of waking up? Stanford researchers conducted a fascinating experiment in behavioral psychology. They tracked two groups of participants for 90 days. Group A followed their normal morning routines. Group B made one micro-commitment within 60 seconds of waking, something as small as making their bed or drinking a glass of water immediately. The results were staggering. Group B showed 40% higher rates of goal completion throughout the day, improved emotional regulation, and significantly better task initiation speed. One tiny decision in the first minute created a cascade of disciplined behavior for the next 16 hours. The researchers called this decisional momentum, the psychological principle that small wins compound into behavioral patterns. Here's why this matters. Your brain operates on precedent. Each decision you make sets a micro-expectation for the next decision. When your first conscious action is intentional and controlled, you establish a pattern of agency. Your subconscious interprets this as, today, I am in command. But when your first action is reactive, checking notifications, hitting snooze, scrolling feeds, you establish the opposite pattern. Today, external forces control me. William James, the father of American psychology, wrote about this in 1890. He called it the principle of acquired habit. The first action of the day is disproportionately influential because it occurs when your prefrontal cortex is most neuroplastic. It's literally easier to install new behavioral patterns in the first hour after waking than at any other time. Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook both follow this principle religiously. Their first action isn't email or meetings. It's something they control entirely: reading, exercise, or strategic thinking. They're protecting their decisional momentum from external interference. This isn't privilege, it's pattern recognition. And here's the final truth that ties everything together. You don't need a perfect morning routine. You need one intentional action in the first 60 seconds. That's the difference between high performers and everyone else. They claim the first decision. Everything else follows. If you're ready to own your mornings, type the word momentum below. Which ritual resonates most with your current challenges? Smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. High performance is a deliberate practice. You just unlocked the first principle. The investigation continues. There's always something deeper hidden beneath the surface.